place where we can learn to bake anything. Today we will be making apple crumble, which is a low sugar recipe perfect for elderly and children and people of all ages to enjoy. First, we will start with the apple crumble. Here I have plain flour, fine caster sugar, almond nibs, and cold butter. It is very important to use cold butter for a crumbly texture. We'll start by making the crumble. Using the tips of your fingers and not using the palm of your hand, because your fingers are not so warm compared to the palm, so it wouldn't melt the butter so quickly. We will rub the butter and flour and sugar together using the tips of our fingers to create a crumbly texture. This crumble will go on top of our apple crumble. So now that we have this crumbly texture, as you can see, we can stop mixing it and put it aside. Next, we will wash and peel one green apple. I'm using green apple because it is tart and will add some acidity to the crumble, which is a nice addition to the sweetness. I remove the skin of the apple so that the texture will be better. When slicing the apples, I will cut around half like this on all sides. We don't want it to be too big, otherwise the cooking time will be too long, or too small and the texture won't be as good. So we are going for around moderate sized. Then I proceed to cut it into half and into squares like this, bite-sized pieces. So it's easier for the elderly to enjoy this dessert as well. After baking, the apples will also shrink in size and soften. When cutting the apples, please cut slowly to be safe. The point of this workshop is to enjoy the process of baking, so you can take your time with each step. This is not a competition. Okay, now we are done slicing the apple pieces. Here I have the green apples and I'm going to add brown sugar, plain flour, and cinnamon powder. The brown sugar will help to sweeten the green apples, and the plain flour will help to give it to thicken the apple juice that comes out from baking the apples, and it will give it a sauce-like texture instead of being too watery. And for the cinnamon powder, it will give a fragrance of the warm spices to our apple crumble, which makes it even tastier. So we just add this mixture into our green apples and combine everything together with your hands to marinate the green apples. For this apple crumble recipe, we don't have to cook the apples beforehand, because I find that if you add additional water in cooking the apples, it dilutes the apple flavor. So instead, we have the natural juices from the green apple to cook in the oven without any additional water, which intensifies the apple flavors. So we marinate the green apples, combine the sugars and flour and spices evenly, and then we can divide it into 3 tins, 3 aluminum tins, which I have here. If you have deeper aluminum tins, you can just use 2, but we are doing a small recipe today, so you don't have to make too much if you are just having the dessert alone or maybe with 1 or 2 friends, so we are making a small portion today. But you can feel free to multiply the recipe if you are serving a big crowd or making for a party with more people. So in our workshops, we normally have a group of 2 that will do one recipe together, which is perfect as the portion size is not too big. Once we have divided the apples into the aluminum tins, we can press them down slightly. This step is so that the crumble won't fall all the way to the bottom of the tin if we don't push it down. So I just compress the apples so that later the crumble will remain on top, instead of falling down to the bottom of the tin if there is space in between. Okay. Next step will be to use a spoon and put the crumble that we have prepared earlier on top of the apples. Roughly 1 tablespoon each. I'm not putting a lot of crumble because it's for the elderly and we don't want to have too much sugar in the dessert. But if you're a fan of crumble, you can multiply the recipe and make a bigger portion. Try to spread the crumble evenly around the slides as well, so that it's distributed evenly. Next, using the back of the spoon, I just press down slightly on the crumble to compact it together, but please don't press too hard. Just slightly. Now that we are done with this step, I will put it into the oven preheated at 160 degrees Celsius to bake for around 30 to 35 minutes. The reason I'm using a lower temperature is so that the crumble will be baked evenly and crunchy. If you use a high temperature of around 180 degrees Celsius, it may appear golden brown, but the crumble may still be a bit soft inside, which is not what we want because we want a crunchy and crumbly texture in contrast with the soft apples beneath. So I'd rather go for a lower temperature and a longer baking time. And now our apple crumble is done. There is a golden brown crumble on top and soft apples on the bottom. Please try this recipe out and share it with your friends.